What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Two Stripes Podcast, the podcast that covers everything happening in the world of college football. My name is Colton Denning, and I am joining you for the first time in 2 months. I guess I'm not joining you. I'm hosting you. I guess that would be the right word. But nonetheless, I am recording a podcast here for the first time in 2 months. I've been terrible. I've been keeping up with other things, but I am back here on the Two Stripes Podcast, and I want to thank you for joining me. Make sure to visit soundcloud.com/twostripespod and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. Just search Two Stripes Podcast, and you can keep up with everything going on there. Follow me on Twitter @DubsCo, and keep up with my YouTube page. A lot of college football highlights up there, youtube.com/Colton Denning. Now that my shilling after 2 months is out of the way, let's get into today's show. Like I said, it's been a while, but a lot has happened, and the 2018 college football season is over. Clemson is our national champion. I got to go to the game, sit up close in the Alabama end zone, sit amongst the Alabama fans as they watch their beloved team get absolutely decimated, which was a highlight for me. And quite frankly, going to a national championship game, just some bucket list shit. So that was a lot of fun. But now we're in the off season, and as we know, with literally every offseason ever, it is long and it is cold, and the 2019 season seems like it is very far, far, far away. But that doesn't mean that nothing is happening, because whether it's quarterback transfers, coaching changes, player suspensions, NFL draft stuff, the original signing period is coming up too in February. It's all still happening in college football, and we're going to talk about it here on the podcast all offseason. So we might as well get right to it. Coming up in a second, you'll hear an interview I did with Albie, who is one of the editors over at vivathematadors.com, SB Nation's Texas Tech site, about Matt Wells and the direction of the Red Raiders. Texas Tech has been so defined in the last 2 decades, basically, by the air raid, by Mike Leach, by Cliff Kingsbury, in this style of play that everybody knows them for, that hiring a guy from Utah State is really a departure from that identity. So I wanted to get Albie on the show and hear his thoughts and get the general feel from Texas Tech fans and their point of view on what direction the program is going in a Big 12 right now that is quietly making a lot of good hires, and we know what they can do offensively, but you see that Oklahoma isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Texas right now is playing at a high level under Tom Herman, so the Big 12 is kind of secretly just lurking in the shadows, and Texas Tech is one of those teams that is going to be defined by how this Matt Wells hire works out. So it was really cool to talk to Albie and get his perspective on where they're going to go from here. But why hear it from me on this intro when you can just hear it from Albie himself? So let's get right to it. Here's my discussion with Albie Shore from Viva the Matadors about Texas Tech. I am super stoked to be joined by one of the editors for Viva the Matadors and also one of the co-hosts for the Air Raid podcast, and his name is Albie Shore. Albie, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Colton.
Hey, dude, it's January 15th. The off-season just started. The national championship already feels like it was 3 months ago. The off-season feels like it's going to last 8 years like it always does. What do you do to get yourself through this off-season? I know Tech's basketball program has really turned it up in the last couple of seasons, so you got that. What else do you do to stretch the time in between the off-season?
See, back in the day, what us Red Raiders would do is we would just drink, like, a lot in the meantime, right? Like, that's kind of what we're known for, and that's kind of what we did. Now that the basketball team's good, I guess we just started watching basketball. Like, so Chris Beard has the team. Right now, I mean, and I kind of feel, maybe I'm being a homer, but I think this team's a Final Four contender. I think we're that good. So that's kind of how we spend our weekends now. And we still drink, don't get me wrong. But,
okay, that's what I wanted to ask. Is it just basketball, or is there still the drinking involved?
No,
I like to hear that.
There's still the drinking. There's still the drinking. And also the baseball team's a national championship contender too. So it's kind of weird because my entire life, Tech's all been about football and really nothing else. And now it's literally every sport but football that we care about.
Well, but now there's some excitement with the football team, and let's just dive right into it because last month, Tech fires Cliff Kingsbury, hometown guy, famous quarterback there, basically an icon amongst the program, brings in Matt Wells from Utah State. But before we really dig into what he's going to bring and the stamp he's going to put onto the program, where are Tech fans at right now? What do they expect from this program? How does everybody feel going into the 2019 offseason?
Well, so before the season ended, there's been basically a split between Tech fans for probably the last 2 years. And the split's basically been ones that have wanted him fired and ones that have wanted to keep him because, like you said, he's the prodigal son. He's the star from almost 20 years ago that helped put Tech on the map. So everyone's wanted him to succeed from the beginning, but there's a group of people that still think he was the guy, and the people that are on my side that says no, he hasn't been the guy since he basically stepped foot on campus. He's just not. He doesn't got it. I do want to give him a shout out because maybe now everybody will look at Tech and say, maybe from Tech I can get fired and get an NFL job. So maybe there's that, But no, so that was kind of the thing between the fan bases. It was a little bit of a divide. A lot of people this year felt that he got shafted because of the injury situation we had. I mean, for those that don't know, our true freshman quarterback Alan Bowman, who looks like a star, got hurt and was out for. He got injured twice throughout the year. The last one out for good, and that was a big reason why we lost the last 3 games. You could argue that if Alan Bowman's healthy for the entirety of the season, that maybe Tech is contending for a Big 12 championship, or at the very least has at least about 8 wins. So that's kind of where that side of the fan base is. Then there's ones on my side that are kind of like he's been here for 6 years and he's only had 3 bowl seasons. And that's not good. I mean, that's at the end of the day, he's had the worst head coaching record for the last guy to have a head coaching record as bad as him was Jerry Moore in the early 80s. Right. So 4 coaches before him have been able to do better than he has, and he just hasn't been able to get it done. So all the excuses that you had before that just wasn't there. So that was kind of the divide. So after he got fired, it was a big thing of who to get next. And now there's another divide among the fan base as, is Matt Wells the guy?
Let's talk about that because from just an outsider's point of view, you look at his coaching history, stops at Navy, Tulsa, New Mexico, Louisville, and of course, Utah State since 2011. And the most glaring or obvious thing there is no ties to Texas. And whenever it comes to Big 12, Texas Tech, more often than not, you see a lot of guys off that air raid tree or in the offshoots that have Texas ties. And Matt Wells doesn't really have that. So is that kind of the big argument amongst the fan base is, hey, is this guy going to be able to recruit in Texas? How is he going to relate to high school coaches? How is he going to build this program and be able to work in ways that maybe other people haven't worked? Because we saw Tommy Tuberville come in and didn't really have the ties, and whether it was a cultural thing, philosophical, it didn't really work out. Are people afraid of that?
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that a lot of people, everybody doesn't want a head coach that's going to be here for a few years and leave, right? Like that. So that's the thing. So Tech fans are very scared of a Tubby Smith situation. Tubby Smith on the basketball side was here at Tech for 3 years, and then he jumped to Memphis. And so a lot of people are scared of that. And to a lesser degree, Tommy Tuberville, but that was more so not jumping for a better opportunity. That was him just absolutely hating the city of Lubbock and wanting to leave.
Just being Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, as you know, that I want to necessarily say on his aspect, but a lot of people are very scared to get a coach that's just going to come in here and kill it and then end up leaving. But the thing about Matt Wells is, and there's definitely pause to the fact that Matt Wells doesn't have any Texas experience, because recruiting in Texas is a different beast than the rest of the entire country. Not just the fact that it has the most, just football playing athletes, but it's the way the high school system is set up, the way the camps are set up, everything down here is just so unique and so different. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't have experience recruiting down here, it really puts you at a disadvantage, which is a big reason why a lot of people didn't expect Matt Rule out down in Baylor to be successful. But I think he's kind of been the blueprint of showing that you don't have to necessarily have that experience to be good. I mean, 2 years, Baylor already is looking much better than anybody would have expected him to be, making a bowl season in just the second year. So I think the idea behind Matt Wells is the same thing. I personally was not a fan of the Matt Wells hire. not because I don't think Matt Wells is a good coach. I do think he's a good coach. It's that Tech could have had, there were higher qualified people on the radar, right? Like, so West Virginia just hired Neil Brown, and Neil Brown used to be the offensive coordinator at Tech. And a lot of people don't like Neil Brown because when you talk Tommy Tuberville's name is like saying Beetlejuice 3 times in Lubbock. Like, just nobody wants to even talk about him or anything to do with those years that he was here. Neil Brown, unfortunately, is associated with that. But Neil Brown is the most impressive mid-major head coach the last 2 years. Like, he's been the best, the most impressive. He was one of the guys that I really heavily vouched for because the job he did at Troy was amazing. And then not only Neil Brown, but Dana Holgorsen kind of actively recruited himself to Texas Tech, saying that he wanted to go. And that's who I was kind of on, getting a guy like Dana. Now UH has him. There was obviously problems there between him and the AD and administration in general in West Virginia. He wanted to come back to Tech, which is where he was an assistant coach for a long time. And the fact that we didn't give him an interview, I think, to me, was kind of the problem that I had with it. You also had Seth Luttrell, a former Tech assistant and a guy that's basically coached in Big 12 areas his entire life, knows how to do recruit Texas and things of that nature. And he was a guy that came that close to being the K-State head coach. So there were other qualified people that wanted the Tech job, that we could have got for the Tech job, that we didn't really look their way. I mean, actually, and a lot of people don't know this, Mike Norvell, the coach at Memphis, it wasn't broadcasted, but I won't reveal any reason why I know this, but I do know for a fact he was very interested in the Tech job as well. But Mike Norvell is another guy that there's no doubt in my mind Mike Norvell would have came if he was successful at Tech, would have jumped ship. But he wanted to be able to get the opportunity to recruit in Texas. And so there was a lot of guys that I think, and when some of these names got floated around, the Tech fan base was like, ooh, that looks good, that looks good, that looks good. And to hear about Matt Wells, who did a decent job at Utah State, but also the record was less than stellar. You know, this past year he had a 10-win season, but before the 2 years before that weren't great. And so you see things like that, and you say, well, you look at the fact that Neil Brown's had a better record recently, and Seth Luttrell's had a better record recently, and Dana Holgorsen has the experience, and things of that nature, it does give you pause.
When people break up, like if your friends break up with somebody and then the next person they get with is the total opposite of their ex, this to me kind of seems like, from Kirby Hokut's standpoint, going from Cliff Kingsbury, and based off of what you're saying, not even really interviewing Dana Holgorsen, it seems like he wanted to swing in the exact opposite direction to a guy in Matt Wells, doesn't have Texas experience, isn't a part of that air raid tree, is kind of more of a program builder, more of, I guess, I don't even know if this is the right term for it, but a clean-cut guy. You know, I was reading that athletic piece on the first 100 hours of Matt Wells being there, and it seems like he has a very specific vision and a personality that meshes more with Kirby Hokut than maybe some of the other people you mentioned.
Yeah, so after we hired Matt Wells, I kind of racked my brain trying to figure out why. Because the thing about it is that from the second Kingsbury was fired, Matt Wells was arguably the first name that popped up as far as confirmed people that Kirby was interested in. So it wasn't like Kirby had a bunch of, I mean, obviously the Brent Venables thing was that was real. Kirby definitely had interest there, but that just wasn't going to happen. And personally, I thought he was holding out for the K-State job, but I guess Venables just really likes being at Clemson. But Matt Wells, from the very beginning, that was one of the first names mentioned that Kirby was legitimately interested in. So Kirby definitely had his eyes set on Matt Wells. So I tried to rack my brain as to why Wells, like what about him? Why does he like him? And after one interview, Kirby started canceling other interviews. You know, that was his guy from the very beginning. So I started racking my brain as to why that was the case. And what I've figured out, and this is what I believe, this is what I think, is that I agree with you. I agree that he wanted something different. One of the things that Cliff did when he first got in is he had no head coaching experience and had very little coaching experience in general by the time he took the Tech coaching job. When he first got in, he went in and he hired all of his friends, all of, some guys that kind of a group of guys that had just been former Tech players that he thought the fact that they just bled Tech would really work. And that's what he did. He never coached with a lot of them, but he knew them. And that didn't really work out. Wells, on the other hand, has his core group of guys that all have moved with him from Utah State to Tech. And I personally believe that that was part of the pitch when he was getting interviewed, was that I guarantee you I'm going to bring my offensive and defensive coordinators, because the second Wells was hired, Yost, and the DC was also on their way as well. And Patterson were on their way as well with Wells to Tech, just like that, instantly. And he, in his first speech, he preached the fact that his entire coaching group was coming with him, and that was very important for him. So I think that was one thing that intrigued Kirby as well. Another thing that I think intrigued Kirby was that one thing that Cliff was all about when he first got here, and he was very big on it, was the fact that he was really wanted to recruit. He wanted to get players. He said the most important thing is getting talented players. That's key number one. Right? And I agree with him. I 100% agree with that. Wells, on the other hand, even though he does agree with every coach wants talented players, Wells, on the other hand, has experience with winning games with less than stellar talent, similar to Mike Leach. And so, and I think that was another thing that intrigued Kirby. Everybody always says that it's hard to recruit to Tech, and it is hard to recruit. Now, I do think that it's a little overrated how hard it is, but I do think it is difficult to recruit to Tech that as Lubbock as opposed to Austin, right? Or Norman, which is right outside of Oklahoma City, right? Like, that's a much easier places to recruit to. But I think that the fact that Wells was able to take a dumpster fire of a program like Utah State and make them a Mountain West Conference championships multiple times over and have 10-win seasons with less than stellar talent, I think intrigued Kirby. And the fact that Wells, I mean, you talk to some guys in like NFL circles and things of that nature. One thing about Wells' coach team is they know he coaches his players up very well. He'll take a 2-star player and they'll get better coaching at Utah State than they'll get almost anywhere else. So that, I think, also intrigued Kirby in the fact that even if we don't recruit as high enough as a Texas or an Oklahoma would, we'd be able to train these guys to where by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're just as good as some of those 4 and 5 stars that were going other places.
Listen, I'm not trying to kiss up to the audience here, but I've been to Waco, and if you can recruit Waco, you can recruit Lubbock.
I know that.
I know that.
Thank you.
I know that for sure.
I say that all the time. Thank you.
Yeah, I've rolled through there. I've had that Whataburger on Baylor's campus a few times. It's still super early. But what does the changing of this identity look like for the offense and the defense? Because I think that's the thing that everybody wants to talk about is, and that's what we've associated with Tech for so long, is throwing the ball, and that's the style they're going to play. But it's also been the meme on college football internet that, yeah, we know Tech can do that, but if they could play any defense, they would be much better. And I do think they took a step forward. They finished 87th in S&P Plus this past year. But you look at Utah State, and Matt Wells fielded some salty ass defenses when he was there. They were 28th in defensive S&P Plus this season. What does that changing identity look, not only for just each side of the ball, but for the program in general?
See, so that's going to be interesting, right? Like, so that's the last 2 years, I would say Tech's defense has actually improved quite a bit. Back with what is it? The 2016 season was probably the worst defense I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
like,
that was rough.
That was Pat Mahomes' last year at Tech. The worst defense I've ever seen in my life. Like, that was bad, right? That was the year we gave up 68 to Arizona State. Like, that was bad. So since then, David Gibbs has improved, and even in the 2017 season, even though we were still a very bad defense stat-wise, and I think we were still like 100th in S&P Plus in 2017, we got turnovers, and the defense was able to make some plays that we hadn't been able to make in a few years. Last year, you said we were 87th. We were actually a lot higher until we virtually gave up on the season the last 2 games. The defense was actually legitimately decent last year. It'll be very interesting for Keith Patterson, the new DC, to take the defensive talent we have, because we are going to be losing some big pieces on defense, like a Dakota Allen, for those of y'all that may have seen him on Last Chance U. Dakota Allen was our Clay Matthews. I mean, I argue he's one of the best Tech defenders ever. You know, that's how good I think he was as a defender. But he's gone. And so is Jashawn Johnson, one of our 4-year starting safety. He's also gone. So some of those pieces are leaving, but at the same time, you still have a lot more defensive talent now than you'd say 2 or 3 years ago that Patterson has to work with. So it's a matter of whether Patterson, who's also changing the defense from a 4-2-5, which is what we were playing last year, to a 3-3-5, which is very similar to what Iowa State runs. And Iowa State is arguably the best defense in the Big 12. So that swarm 3-3-5 defense would be very interesting how Patterson's able to skew that over. I'm always going to be a skeptic on our defense because I'm yet to see it since Ruffin McNeil back in the late 2000s. We haven't had a good defense. I think last year was probably the best defense since then, and it still wasn't great. So it'll be interesting to see on the offensive side of the ball. Funny enough, I actually don't think we're going to see that much of a change. I know a lot of people assume that there will be one, but contrary to belief, Cliff Kingsbury didn't really run as much of an air raid as his predecessors, Neil Brown and Mike Leach. We ran the ball, especially when we had the running talent, we ran the ball. And I think that was the thing, is that Cliff Kingsbury was actually really good at adapting to what the offensive skill players he had. Last year, or 2018 season, we had a pretty good and deep running game, so we ran the ball a lot more. When we had DeAndre Washington as our starting running back, a guy that I also would say is probably one of the greatest tech running backs ever, we ran the ball a lot more. When we had Pat Mahomes in no running game, we threw the heck out of that ball. So and we threw it downfield. You know, a lot of the things of the air raid is a lot of lateral passes, a lot of screens, a lot of in between stuff. Cliff Kingsbury's offense really wasn't like that, and David Yost's offense is actually kind of similar. They also like to run the ball. They also like to go vertically. One big difference I would say between David Yost's offense and Cliff Kingsbury's offense is the use of the tight end. Tech hasn't used the tight end that much. Since
who was that big bastard a few years ago that got drafted by the Jets? He was the man, first rounder.
Jason Morrow. That's right. So Jason Morrow, we didn't really use him as a tight end. We used him as a really, really big inside receiver. So I don't remember the last time we really used a tight end, maybe back in the 90s as an actual tight end. So that's going to be interesting because David Yost's offense actually likes to use the tight end in both blocking and pass catching. So that'll be very interesting to see how that works. But I think that's actually going to be the biggest difference between David Yost and Cliff Kingsbury's offense.
Man, shout out Jason Morrow. He was one of my favorite players to watch when he was still in college.
Oh, he was a beast in college.
You talked about the departures and losing some guys on the defense. But it does seem to me that if you're going to have an area where you lose guys for this staff coming in, you would rather it be the defense, because you look at the offense, like you said, Bowman's coming back, a guy like TJ Vasher, who you just look at him in uniform, not even seeing him play, looks like one of the more impressive receivers in the Big 12, and that's saying something. And
not to cut you off, but that is huge. I'm actually shocked that TJ Vasher's coming back. I thought at the beginning of the year, I thought this was going to be his last year with us. So I'm actually shocked that he's coming back. He kind of had an injury-prone season, which hurt his stats, and then not only that, but Anton Wesley went the F off. So he kind of went to number 2 fiddle. But TJ Vasher is probably one of the most just pure God-given ability. One of the most talented wide receivers I've seen put on a Texas Tech uniform. He can catch anything in his radius. He's 6'6", can jump out the building. So the fact that he's coming back for another year is huge.
Yeah, TJ Vasher is one of those guys where the new staff watches film for 5 minutes and just see him and they're like, okay, we understand what we got here. But they have those guys back on offense, so they have something to work with. And even if they're a little bit less experienced on defense, at least with this particular staff, they know what they're doing. They know what they want to implement. They can coach guys up, like you said, even if they're guys who were second or third string from last year. If there's one thing that I think stands out to me about Matt Wells is even if he's not working with the best talent, he's going to be able to put those guys in the right position, and at the very least, they're going to know what they're doing out on the field.
Yeah, and that's the weird funny thing about this first year for Matt Wells is that a lot of the times when you have a coaching turnover, that first year is the toughest. But offensively, we didn't have a lot of people that left. I mean, the O-line for a good amount of the part is going to stay intact. I mean, we're going to lose a couple seniors that are going to graduate, but we were actually pretty deep on O-line last year. They'll have some fill-ins. And then our star O-lineman, Zach Anderson, which is the highest rated recruit we've ever had, 5-star recruit. He's just going to be a junior next year. Now I think this will probably be his last year, as there's a decent chance he may declare early for the NFL. But at the end of the day, he's going to be here. Alan Bowman's going to be back. Our entire running game is going to be back, and the running game was actually pretty decent last year. And TJ Vasher. So offensively, David Yost and Matt Wells actually has a pretty good template to work with. It's a defense that's definitely going to be the question mark next season coming in.
So before we get out of here, what are 2 key things in this offseason that you're watching out for Texas Tech? Because we've passed the early signing period. The traditional National Signing Day is coming up. We got a long way to go, but what are a couple of things that you are watching out for this offseason for Tech to kind of get a feel as we head into Wells' first year?
Well, so I mean, the main thing is you kind of harped on a little bit was recruiting. I mean, that's the main thing. And for the most part, I'll say this: Wells has done a really good job in keeping the recruits that we already had. That I think is going to fit his plan. A lot of them decommitted the second Kingsbury got fired, but guys like Maverick McIver, who was the star quarterback that was signed on, he recommitted after one conversation with Yost and Wells. So a lot of those guys are still remained on. That'll be big, but not only that, but I think the 2019 class was which was turning out to be Kingsbury's best class. Funny enough, keeping a lot of those guys is going to be really huge for Wells, and then seeing what type of players he has on for 2020 is also going to be big. So that's big as far as recruiting goes. Another thing I'm kind of looking out for is how the players adapt to the new system. One thing is, especially defensively, at one point I believe we had 7 new defensive coordinators in 7 years, and David Gibbs had been the defensive coordinator for the last 3. So there we finally had continuity on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's the reason why we saw defensive improvement. So now for the first time in 4 years, we're having a new defensive coordinator. So how are the players able to grasp the new change? Because it is a change. It's going, like I said, from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5 swarm. So how are they able to grasp that? How are players that were recruited system able to adapt to now a 3 linebacker set to a going from a B gap DT to nose tackle, things of that nature. So those are one of the things that I'm looking for, and I guess I won't find out until April. I really won't find out till September.
People can say what they want about Texas Tech and the Big 12 in general, but I'll tell you, man, there is never any shortage of things to talk about, and it is always exciting. For January, I think we can see that Texas Tech is going to have a lot of really, I think, fun and interesting storylines, not even in the season. That'll be one thing, but just leading up to the season, there's going to be so many cool things to talk about because this is really the biggest departure that they've made from an identity that's been crafted basically over the last 2 decades, and I know that I can't wait to see how it pans out. And if you guys want to keep up with everything happening in Texas Tech football and all of Texas Tech athletics, there's a lot going on. Basketball team is great. Baseball team is great. Albie was saying that earlier. Be sure to go to vivathematadors.com. You can also follow them on Twitter at Viva the Matadors. And you can also listen to their podcast. It is called the Air Raid Podcast. Check it out on vivathematadors.com. Albie, you got anything else you want to plug, man?
That's it for me. You can also follow me personally at Mr_Albie Shore, ALBIESHORE. I also do some live radio for Houston. I live down here in Houston, so I do some live radio down here as well. Part of the Third Coast Therapy. We preview some Texan stuff and things of that nature. But I'm all about Houston sports and Tech sports and actually in Big 12 sports. Alex Delton transferring from K-State to TCU. That's crazy.
Oh, okay. Look at Gary Patterson trying to make some moves on that quarterback front.
He needs it.
Yes, that he does. Well, Albie, thanks for joining the show, man, and talking Texas Tech. We probably could have gone like an hour and a half, but it's a slow burn for the off season, and hope to have you on the show again, man. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Colton.
I'm always down for some Texas Tech talk. You look at after those Tier 1 and Tier 2 programs, you get into Tier 3 and some of the more nondescript Power 5 teams. A lot of those programs are really just boring as shit. And there's nothing that stands out about them. They're boring to talk about. They're bland. And say what you will about Tech, but they are never boring. And I think that even if they make a departure from kind of the identity that they've established themselves to be having since basically, 2000 or 1999, whenever Mike Leach first came around, I think that they're always exciting. And this is a team that I'm super intrigued to watch and see what they do in this first offseason under Matt Wells and what direction they go, because I really do believe that if they just play decent defense with that talent they have on offense and what they can do with kids from the state of Texas, they're set up to be more well-rounded than they've been in quite some time. So I'm looking forward to watching to see what they do this offseason and where Texas Tech goes under Matt Wells. Thanks to Albie Shore for joining the show, dropping knowledge on that. Be sure to visit vivathematadors.com. Follow them on Twitter at Viva the Matadors, and follow Albie on Twitter at Mr_Albie Shore. I also want to thank and shout out you, the listener, for taking time to check out today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a first-timer, hope you come back. Please shoot me some feedback on Twitter at Dubsco or on Apple Podcasts. Just search Two Straps Podcast and leave feedback there. Let me know what I can do to make the show better. And if you like it, please subscribe and go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Colton Denning. And also check out the show on soundcloud.com/2strapspod. The tentative plan for this offseason is one podcast a week, one episode a week, hopefully with some more interviews from people around the college football universe, maybe some coaches. Had Mike McIntyre on the show last offseason. We'll see who I can go out there and grab this offseason, but going to try to make that a plan. So I hope that you guys like the show and you stick around for a long offseason, but what should be a fun offseason. But until next time, I want to thank you one last time for listening. My name is Colton Denning, and this is the Two Straps Podcast.